One man's pilgrimage crashed an entire continent's economy, and nobody saw it coming. In 1324, a West African king named Mansa Musa decided to take a religious journey across the Sahara to Mecca. Sounds routine. It wasn't. He brought so much gold with him that by the time he reached Cairo, the price of gold had collapsed across North Africa and the Mediterranean. Inflation spiraled. Entire markets seized up. This wasn't accidental tourism, it was an economic shockwave that traveled faster than any ship. Exhibit 1, the scale. Mansa Musa didn't travel alone. He brought a retinue of 60,000 people, 12,000 of them enslaved people carrying gold bars. The caravan stretched across the desert for miles. Contemporary accounts describe it as a moving city. The logistics alone required months of planning and resources that dwarfed most European kingdoms' annual budgets. The math is where it gets interesting. Historians estimate Mansa Musa possessed roughly 400 pounds of gold per person in his entourage. In today's terms, we're talking about a mobile treasure equivalent to several $billion. But here's the thing, gold's value only works if scarcity is real. The moment you flood a market with that much supply, the premise collapses. Exhibit 2, what happened in Cairo. When Mansa Musa arrived, he didn't hoard the gold, he spent it. He bought goods, funded construction, paid for hospitality. Gold flooded the Egyptian market. Local merchants who'd built fortunes on gold's scarcity watched their wealth evaporate. The price dropped by roughly 25% within months. Wealth that took generations to accumulate vanished. But the shock didn't stop at Egypt. Trade networks connected Cairo to Venice, Genoa, the Ottoman territories. Gold from Mansa Musa's spending rippled through Mediterranean markets. Prices spiked. Currencies destabilized. Merchants who'd hedged their positions on gold's value took losses. Nobody in this story is stupid, look at what they were paid to see. If you own gold-backed wealth, you're terrified of sudden supply increases. Exhibit 3, the recovery period. Historians tracked gold prices across the Mediterranean for years after his pilgrimage. The inflation didn't correct quickly. It took roughly a decade for markets to stabilize. During that time, economies dependent on gold-backed credit systems experienced real contraction. People who needed credit to fund trade couldn't access it at reasonable rates. Supply chains got squeezed. Now here's the part most history books miss. Mansa Musa knew exactly what he was doing. He wasn't naive. Mali had extensive trade networks. His advisors understood economics. The pilgrimage served multiple purposes, religious obligation, yes, but also political theater. He wanted the world to see Mali's wealth. The economic damage was a side effect, not a bug. It was the price of signaling power. Exhibit 4, the geopolitical calculus. By 1324, Mali was consolidating power in West Africa. Competitors existed, the Songhai, the Mossi states. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage announced Mali's arrival as a global player. European and Islamic powers took notice. The economic disruption was almost a feature. It proved Mali could mobilize resources at a scale that destabilized entire continents. Fear is valuable currency. What Mansa Musa's story reveals is this: markets aren't natural forces. They are systems built on consensus about scarcity and value. When a single actor can unilaterally change supply at that scale, the entire system becomes vulnerable. This isn't new. It happened in 1324. It's happened since. Whenever one entity controls enough of a resource, the stability of that market is conditional on their restraint. The irony, Mansa Musa's pilgrimage eventually strengthened Mali's economy. The gold spending funded infrastructure, trade relationships, and reputation. Short-term inflation became long-term competitive advantage. He'd essentially invested in soft power at the cost of immediate price stability. The merchants who lost money, they adjusted. Markets adapted. Mansa Musa's wealth endured. Exhibit 5, and this is the kicker, we know all this happened because contemporary chroniclers documented it. Egyptian historians recorded the price collapse. Merchants kept ledgers. The economic disruption was so significant that it became historical record. That's how we know. When one actor reshapes an entire market, people notice. They write it down. They remember. So what's the lesson here? Mansa Musa didn't break the medieval economy through malice or stupidity. He broke it through sheer resource concentration. He had so much gold that his spending alone could reshape markets across continents. That's not a flaw in his planning, it's a feature of how wealth concentration works. When one entity controls enough, they become a market force in themselves. The medieval Mediterranean never fully recovered its pre-1324 gold price equilibrium. Markets adjusted, prices found new baselines, but the old assumptions about scarcity and value had been permanently challenged. That's what happens when enough concentrated wealth moves at once, the system recalibrates around it. The economy doesn't break, it restructures. Mansa Musa lived until around 1337. By then, Mali's reputation as a wealthy, sophisticated empire was cemented. The pilgrimage and the economic chaos it created had achieved its purpose. He'd announced Mali to the world in a way that couldn't be ignored. The gold had done its job, the prices had stabilized, history had moved on. What makes this story economically relevant today is that the mechanics haven't changed. Concentrated wealth still reshapes markets. Supply shocks still create volatility. When one actor controls enough of a resource, whether gold, oil, or digital assets, their decisions ripple through the entire system. Mansa Musa's pilgrimage is a medieval case study in how markets respond to sudden, massive supply changes. The richest man who ever lived didn't just accumulate gold, he weaponized it, not through violence but through visibility. He spent it publicly, magnificently across continents. The economic damage was collateral to a larger strategy, announcing power through resource deployment. That's a lesson that transcends centuries. Wealth that stays hidden has limited value. Wealth that moves reshapes everything around it. Mansa Musa's story ends not with a collapse or tragedy, but with integration. He became a legend. Mali became a reference point for African wealth and sophistication in European and Islamic imagination. The economic shock that terrified merchants in Cairo and Venice became the foundation of a historical narrative that lasted centuries. He'd paid for immortality in gold. So here's what we've established. One man's pilgrimage in 1324 collapsed gold prices across 3 continents. It took markets a decade to stabilize. The disruption was so significant that historians documented it centuries later. That's not luck or accident. That's what happens when concentrated wealth moves at scale. Mansa Musa didn't break the medieval economy, he revealed how fragile it was. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research. Subscribe to see how fortunes reshape markets. There's a new case of wealth in motion every week. This video is for educational and informational purposes only and is not financial advice. Always do your own research.